My dear friends, finally, many of you have seen with your own very eyes and have truly realized that Northern Cyprus is not at all part of the Middle East. Rather, it is situated in the south of Europe, and it is important to note that our neighbors in Southern Cyprus are actually a full member state of the European Union. The prediction I made on March 4th, 2026, just a few days after the war in Iran began, and European media started spreading all sorts of scary stories about Northern Cyprus, has come true 100%. At that time, I said in my forecast that there would be no military actions in Northern Cyprus or anywhere on Cyprus at all, and this simply can't be. That Northern Cyprus is not part of this conflict and that it will not affect us in any way. Not a single flight was cancelled and nothing in our lives has changed. What is being said about Cyprus now? The well-known and until recently respected by me European media and even the BBC are spreading outright lies. In this video, I want to talk about the real events that have taken place in Northern Cyprus over the past 6 months. There were so many of them that sometimes we don't experience that much in several years. When I arrived here, I asked, well, what's new? They told me, oh, nothing new. For the previous 30 years, nothing had changed at all, but now, in just the past 6 months, so much has happened that it could completely change the direction of Northern Cyprus's development and transform its entire future. So now let's take a look at what has really happened here, through the eyes of someone who is actually on the ground, seeing the situation from the inside, how things really are, not as portrayed on the internet, in newspapers or on TV. And let's see how these events will affect the lives of people like us. My friends, I am truly deeply outraged. This question, why do the mass media deceive us? By the way, I need your help here. Please come to the comments and share your opinion. I'm about to tell you what I think about this, but it's very important for me to see this issue through your eyes from right there in the countries of Europe, because your opinion might be different and it's very important. It can help us look at this issue from different perspectives. I've never told you about this before because I don't have any proof, I only have a theory, and on our channel we only talk about facts. We talk only about facts, only about the truth. But in this case it's justified. In my forecast from March 4th, I told you that the United Kingdom sent naval forces here, as did France, Germany, the Netherlands and Italy. In general, we've got such a concentration of naval forces here that honestly there's probably never been anything like it anywhere in the world per square mile or per square kilometer. Why is all this necessary? Not a single missile has ever been launched at Cyprus, neither the north nor the south. Nothing like this has ever happened in history, and it's not expected to happen. When the media reported that some missiles were flying towards Cyprus and were shot down, this was denied by the authorities of Southern Cyprus, the authorities of Northern Cyprus, and the authorities of Iran. They said, we have never fired in the direction of Cyprus and we have no intention of doing so. There can't be any stray missiles here because this line between the warring sides, between Iran, Israel and the Emirates is very far away and no stray missile could possibly reach here. But at the same time, there is a huge number of naval forces, all of whom claim, no, we are not participants in the conflict. We never intended to take part in it. We are staying out of it. They are being pressured to do this and they say, we know that Donald Trump openly argues, pressures, asks and even begs them to join the coalition in the war against Iran. All the European countries say, no, we will not join, we are against this war, this is not our war. But they did not send military ships to Cyprus. I have a theory that in reality near Cyprus we have Israel, and in fact they are performing the function of Israel's air defense. So they are simply helping Israel and the US, thus distancing themselves from this war by working against aerial targets flying toward Israel. Because even one of our northern Cypriot fishermen, while simply fishing at sea, recorded on his phone how the trail of a missile that was launched from a ship, because there are no islands there, only water, it's just the Mediterranean Sea, and literally how a second missile rose into the air and flew off somewhere toward the Middle East. And this was never reported anywhere in the media, but here in Northern Cyprus we have this video. If something had flown from here to somewhere else, the side where it landed would definitely have raised objections and expressed protests at the very least. I believe that they serve the function of protecting the skies over Israel and safeguarding the bases of the United Kingdom and the United States of America in the Middle East with their naval air defense systems. There is a lot said about Cyprus in the media, just to somehow justify why this flotilla was sent here. Well, because it certainly wasn't to defend Egypt, right? It's not even involved at all. Definitely not to defend Lebanon. because Lebanon is a small country. If it needed to be protected from someone, troops would simply be sent in. Definitely not to defend Turkey. Turkey is a NATO country, the second largest and most powerful in the North Atlantic Alliance, so it doesn't need protection either. And Cyprus is a very convenient pretext for why military ships can be sent here to protect Israel. But to say we're actually just standing here observing and if by chance normalized, false. Someone fires somewhere near us, we'll defend Cyprus. That's my theory. And by the way, please also write in the comments how serious or not serious this seems to you. As someone who has been living in Northern Cyprus for more than 20 years, I can confirm that nothing has changed in our daily life. Schools are operating as usual, universities are operating as usual too. Several employees from our company went on vacation. Some went to Europe, others to the Middle East. Planes are still flying to various destinations as before. Not a single flight has been cancelled in Northern Cyprus for security reasons. Nothing has changed in our lives. The supermarkets are operating as usual, just as we used to go to work at our office. We still go there now. Zero changes, because we are not in a region where there is a war. We are in a completely different region. We are in Southern Europe, where, thank God, everything has been calm for a long time. But what has really changed for us in Northern Cyprus, and for the better, I'm sure you'll hear this now and be just as pleased as I am. You might remember recently we released a video where I talked about the real downsides of Northern Cyprus. Because what YouTube vloggers say is 90% of the time some kind of strange, unreliable, simply made up information. And the only real problem in the real estate sector that we have here, it's that if there is a military base near your property, you can't find out about it in advance or whether you will get permission to purchase. And after you've already paid the money, after some time you might receive a refusal from the Council of Ministers and you'll have to get rid of your property. And there's absolutely no way to find this out in advance. I made a separate video about this to warn you that unfortunately this danger exists. It's the only one, but unfortunately it does exist in Northern Cyprus. So here's the thing. The government has resolved it. I spoke with the Minister of Internal Affairs and I conveyed these issues to the President through his assistant. The issue has been resolved. As of today, we submit an application to the Ministry of Internal Affairs and receive an official document stating whether foreign buyers are allowed to purchase property in a specific area. Moreover, we provide the exact property title numbers and we receive information specifically for those numbers. So there won't be a situation where, yes, in this area it's allowed, but here you don't qualify. You're 1 meter closer to the military base than your neighbors, so they can, but you can't. No, there are clear specific property title numbers and each real estate property has its own unique property title number. That's it. Now, before we show you a property, we will know for sure whether there are any complications related to the proximity of a military base or any socially or municipally important facility nearby, next to which foreigners are prohibited from buying. That's great news. This is the only obstacle for foreigners when it comes to the safe and secure purchase of real estate in Northern Cyprus. There was an issue and it has been resolved. I really like that. Give this video a like if you're also happy that our lives have become so much better. There's a photo on Facebook. We met up specifically, but we were actually discussing other matters. We talked about the economy. There are economic issues, and I'll talk more about them in the news today. And we met. I wasn't alone. We met with an entrepreneur and asked these questions. Then I approached him separately and said a few things specifically about the economy, not about laws, because he has nothing to do with the laws. That's the parliament and the cabinet of ministers. And we took some photos, which I posted on social media. How else could it be? The authorities need to know what is really happening in the country from real people, not just from their close associates who might distort this information, who might somehow distort it. But in Northern Cyprus, we have democracy. Everything is very simple and transparent here. The mayor, the head of the region, the prime minister, the president, I run into them at the land committee too, but they're just people as well. They also own property and they also need to come in and re-register it. I see him at weddings, at mutual friends' places in the very same line. And what's interesting is that there's a tradition here. At weddings, guests arrive, and at a certain point, the bride and groom wait for a personal congratulations. A line forms to greet them, and since weddings are large, thousands of people come, literally without exaggeration. They all give gifts. They say some kind words. In general, it's a big celebration. And so, in that very same line, you'll find the city mayor, the regional governor, the prime minister, and the president of the country. Well, there's a state security guard next to the president, and we all stand in the same line. There's no such thing as someone skipping the line just because they're too much of a VIP here. No, we stand in the same line, we wait for half an hour until we can reach the bride and groom, say a few words to them, offer our congratulations, take a photo, and then leave. So Northern Cyprus is a very democratic, open, safe, and good country. And that's one of the reasons why we love it. The next news is wonderful, although not a single local resident, not a single Turkish Cypriot would agree with me. They think that what is happening is terrible. The government has frozen increases to the minimum wage and all salaries for the next 9 months. Why are they doing this? Because as I explained in detail in our previous videos, when wages increase, it triggers an inflationary spiral. As soon as the minimum wage is raised, payments to the pension fund, social insurance contributions, and income tax payments also go up accordingly. This is a heavy burden on businesses. As soon as the minimum wage is increased, businesses immediately raise prices, and prices for gasoline, electricity, goods in stores, hair salons, and beauty salons go up as well. Prices rise everywhere for everything, and after a few weeks, when local residents say, once again, it's not enough for us, you just raised our salaries, and again, it's not enough, and now we're already among the top 10 highest minimum wages in Europe. This is wrong, it's not normal, and I don't like it. And so, in order not to fuel this inflationary spiral, the government said, for the next 9 months, we will not raise wages. In response to this, the trade unions, which are very strong in Northern Cyprus, organized a general strike. Maybe it wasn't yesterday, it was probably a couple of months ago. You may have seen it on the internet, on social media. If you follow Northern Cyprus, it all looked very interesting. For the first time in their lives, the police took to the streets to create some kind of barrier and provide protection there. This is the building where the government meets and where the country's president and parliament are located. They did this for the first time. There had never been any unrest in Northern Cyprus throughout the entire history of the country. They didn't know how to put on those bulletproof vests or what to do at all, because all around them were their relatives, acquaintances, neighbors, children, and parents. And they were just standing there the same way they had been the night before, with a glass of whiskey and a kebab in hand. Nevertheless, there was such a powerful confrontation, and it was actively discussed in the media. But in the end, the unions, let something slip. One of them let it slip that even if this law is repealed, we still won't stop striking. Why? I told you about this back in November of last year when I was talking about the elections in Northern Cyprus. Because in November of last year, we had a protest vote. People elected a president from the opposition party. But nothing changed in parliament. The current ruling party still remains. And the cabinet of ministers is made up of another ruling party. So people chose a different direction for the country's development in the person of the new president. But as I told you in that November video, the president doesn't have influence. He cannot, according to the constitution, affect the country's internal affairs. He has different official duties, different powers. Accordingly, the people chose one course for the country's development, but in reality, the country is still heading in the direction set by the previous. For 5 to 6 years, nothing has changed. As a result, people are protesting. They are demanding early elections so that the country can take a different path. I'll be honest with you in advance. If the opposition had any solution to today's economic problems in the country, I think they would have already announced it. They wouldn't be keeping it a secret. I think they don't have any solution and nothing will change. Because the reason for this issue is that Northern Cyprus has a very inefficient state apparatus. If you subscribe to our channel and watch our videos, one day we'll make a big documentary film. I really hope so. For now, we just don't have enough time for it, but I hope we'll definitely make it. I'll tell you things about Northern Cyprus that will really broaden your horizons, and you won't learn this anywhere else, because everything people say about Northern Cyprus is either something they've read somewhere on the internet by people who have never been here, or from some textbooks. But the real story is somewhat different. And once you learn it, you'll be able to understand this country much better. In fact, what happens here will stop bothering or upsetting you. You'll realize that everything is actually very harmonious and good. And here's the nuance. Back when Turkey supported the Turkish Cypriots in 1974, then, after almost 10 years, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus was formed. For 10 years, Turks, Greeks, and Cypriots couldn't come to an agreement, and to this day there remain two separate countries. At that time, at least according to the information I have and what I see with my own eyes, Turkey said, you don't need to develop business. You're under embargo here anyway, so you'll be our sales market. We'll produce everything in Turkey and you'll buy it. When the local authorities asked, but how are we supposed to make a living? They replied, just send everyone into government service. And in places where one government official could have done the job in reality, they immediately hired 50 people instead. That's roughly the ratio. That's how it is today. According to open sources, about 80,000 people receive money from the state. These are salaries for government employees, pensions for government employees, and also a semi-governmental, semi-private sector. We have something similar here too, but they also essentially get their money from the budget. So 80,000 people in total. According to the official census, about 300,000 people live in our country. But in reality, the authorities say since we haven't had a census in a long time, it's already 400,000. So 80,000 government employees make up 20% of the total population, including both Turkish Cypriots and foreigners. That's a lot. For example, in Germany, which in my opinion has quite a lot of civil servants, a lot of social workers, and provides enormous assistance, someone has to provide this help to low-income people. There are excellent social benefits, and someone has to handle all this social assistance, social payments. There, civil servants make up 6 to 7% of the population, but in Northern Cyprus it's 20%. The government apparatus is extremely bloated, it's inefficient, and as a result, a lot of money needs to be spent on it. And as of today, the state has already accumulated a debt of 20 billion Turkish lira. The budget deficit is about 400 million euros. For our small country, that's an enormous amount. And this debt grows by another 5 billion every month because in order to pay the next round of these, salaries and pensions for government employees have to be paid by borrowing more money from the bank every month. That's why the government tried to solve this issue in this way, but it won't solve anything until it actually addresses the problem. Unless the efficiency of the government apparatus is improved, nothing will change. So, if you've seen any strikes or protests, don't let them scare you. These are relatives, acquaintances, friends who have come out to actually call for early parliamentary elections already in June or July, and not to wait until autumn because the opposition really wants to come to power and they're not hiding it. And our government decided that the simplest way to fill the treasury, first of all, is naturally to turn to Turkey, because they came up with the idea that since you don't produce anything, we'll do the manufacturing and you'll do the buying and you'll be government employees and we'll pay your government salaries. Accordingly, they turned to Turkey. If you've watched our videos, you know that in 2025, just the official aid from Turkey, there was actually much more provided through other channels, like the military, for example. A total of 25 billion Turkish lira in aid was allocated, and all of it had already been spent by the end of 2025. In 2026, 22 billion Turkish lira in aid was allocated. Lira, which is about €500 million, approximately at the current exchange rate. And by the way, just the day before yesterday, the Minister of Infrastructure and Transport already reported that every last cent allocated for road construction has been spent, because a portion of those 22 billion was designated for them. And apparently Turkey said, you are spending our aid too quickly. At least that's my assumption. Maybe it makes sense for you to start earning on your own, for example, by collecting taxes from entrepreneurs. Look, you have more Range Rovers, those expensive ones, than in London. You have more Mercedes and BMWs than we do in Germany on the streets of your tiny country. Well, it's true. Mercedes, BMW, and Range Rover are the best-selling car brands in Northern Cyprus. If you've been here, I'm sure you were pleasantly surprised and amazed by this. A country living under embargo, a small country with no industrial economy, outwardly appears to live very, very, very richly. It even looks better than Monaco. For example, the southern coast of France. They really said, okay, we will collect taxes. But in this matter, since they had never actively collected taxes before, it simply wasn't necessary. I see that they started making mistakes. They began to find some minor, perhaps mistakes made by entrepreneurs. For previous years, they started charging penalties. And some debts started to appear. Naturally, since this debt didn't even exist at the end of last year, when they were filing reports for last year, the entrepreneurs were outraged and said, well, we won't pay anything, we'll sort this out. But while the entrepreneurs are trying to resolve this, they can't process any paperwork with government agencies. For example, they are not allowed to re-register property ownership certificates for real estate. They are not allowed to hire new employees or renew work visas for employees whose visas have expired, and thus they are unable to contribute to the budget again and again. For example, a friend of mine who is an entrepreneur, he was charged a small debt for previous years with a penalty of 200,000 Turkish lira. Just for transferring a single property ownership certificate, the state receives over 2 million Turkish lira in taxes from his properties. And he already has a queue of more than 20 properties. So 200,000 versus a total of 2 million in taxes. Well, let's say 12 million right now. Multiply that by 20%, for example, that's 2 to 2.5 million in taxes. And if you multiply that by 20 properties, that's 500 million. That's it, I'm awesome. And so, a situation arose where the entrepreneur supposedly owes 200,000 Turkish lira in tax debt to the tax office, and he can no longer conduct business, even though he already has a line of our buyers, 20 people, waiting to transfer the title deeds and the average amount of taxes for each. For each such transaction, it's 2 million, sometimes 2,400,000 Turkish lira. 20 people, that's 500 million Turkish lira. So because of 200,000 in taxes, the state can't collect 500 million from just one entrepreneur, just from these 20 buyers. I think this is inefficient because of those 200,000. You can charge them penalties, you can go to court, you can impose some restrictions, but not shut down the entire business for a person, just some minor restrictions. For example, you could ban them from leaving the country or prohibit them from buying a new car until they pay their taxes. But if they were allowed to continue doing business, at least just to transfer the certificate of ownership from his previous properties alone, the state would have already profited by 500 million Turkish lira just from him. And that's just one entrepreneur, but we have thousands like him in the country. In general, of course, no one is going to listen to me. Most likely, we will keep doing our best to squeeze out as much tax as we can, raise the minimum wage, because otherwise people, voters, will be outraged. We will try to hold new elections this summer and completely re-elect our authorities, our parliament and the cabinet of ministers. And still, one way or another, we will ask for and receive money from Turkey. And everything will be fine for us. Next in this video, I will tell you specifically what was done with this money. You will be very surprised because we tend to think that Northern Cyprus is just a small, remote, not very developed village, and that's true. But at the same time, thanks to money from Turkey, for example, we now have electronic appointments with doctors. Yes, you can make an appointment with any doctor. If you need to see one today, you can book for today. Well, in the worst case, you'll get in tomorrow. We don't have the problem of waiting for weeks or months. And to make your life even easier, you don't even need to pick up the phone and call the doctor. There's an electronic system, an app. You just book your appointment. You don't even need to make the effort to make that call. Or, for example, again, to improve the comfort of our lives. Starting from April 1st, public transportation in Northern Cyprus introduced payment, only cashless payments, so that the driver isn't distracted by collecting fares, handling cash, giving change, and all that. They introduced the ADA card, which is a new Northern Cypriot credit card. So with this other card people pay, it costs only 100 Turkish lira. I don't use public transportation myself, so I don't know how well it works everywhere, or if it works everywhere, or how it actually functions, but the news itself is very good. And that's wonderful. Or for example, in Northern Cyprus, they successfully perform robotic surgeries, medical operations. This is very important because when an operation is performed in general surgery, gynecology or urology, a very small and precise incision is made. And the smaller the incision, the lower the risk of infection. The smaller the incision, the faster it will heal and the person can return to normal life sooner. And then since it's a robot, it's electronics, it can do it more precisely than a human. And in this way, the percentage of successful operations increases. And as a result, the population will be healthier. They have completed or are completing the construction of new modern clinics in Kyrenia, in Güzelyurt, in Pamuklu, and in Varosha. Just the new roads alone amount to 822 kilometers, which is quite an achievement for our tiny island. They don't just build roads, they also immediately install very good lighting. In my opinion, the lighting is even a bit too strong, but in any case, I'm very glad because well-lit roads mean safety for all of us. And for both pedestrians and drivers, I believe safety is extremely important. Even our banking system, which is actually more advanced than the banking systems of Europe or the United States because it's newer, has also undergone reforms. There are bank checks, and for example, if I receive payment by bank check, I have to go to the bank, deposit the check into my bank account, and it takes at least 3 business days for the check to clear. That is, for the money to be credited to my account. Why? Because a courier from the bank collects the checks, takes them to another bank, and they are processed there. In general, this bureaucratic procedure takes time. As of today, literally just a few days ago, an electronic check processing system was introduced here. Now the courier no longer needs to collect and deliver the checks. It's enough to scan them, which bank managers already do automatically. That's their procedure. They do this, they scan the checks, enter them into the system, and most likely the check is processed immediately. The check goes to the bank that issued it, where they confirm that there are sufficient funds in the account and accordingly carry out the electronic transaction. Well, we'll see. In the first week of June, we have several incoming payments, specifically by check. I think we'll receive these funds and we'll see how quickly they are cashed. And we'll get this money in cash at the register. My friends, at the beginning of the video, I told you that unfortunately, European media constantly talk about some kind of threats in Cyprus. I explained my reasoning as to why they do this. I hope you wrote in the comments what you think about this as well. Maybe you'll open my eyes and the reason is actually something else. But I know for sure that our buyers from Germany, our buyers from Poland, they worry about this. They hear not only about some missiles that don't even exist in reality. Supposedly we were once shelled, but no one ever saw these missiles, and it's unclear where they disappeared to, where they went at all. But they also say that here in Northern Cyprus, things are not calm inside the country either. If I hadn't seen these news reports, I wouldn't even have known about it. Perhaps one of the most famous German TV channels, I watched a video and here they are filming Southern Cyprus. They are filming the British Akrotiri base and they are saying that it's a nightmare what's happening there. They interview a local resident, a Greek Cypriot, and he says something in Greek. And this German channel doesn't even translate what he says into German. And then the journalist comments in German. She says, here is a person who is worried that missiles will fly here, and what about the children? The schools are closed, so what? Should we now leave our homes? In the comments under this article on social media, Greeks and Cypriots who know Greek and understand, unlike me and the citizens of Germany, understand what this person is actually saying in Greek. They say, what are you talking about? You're telling this story, but he's actually talking about something else. He's saying that the price of alcohol has gone up and he's not happy about it. This has nothing to do with your translation at all. So why are they doing this? In my opinion, this is not just unprofessionalism, it's also deceiving their viewers. Frankly, I think it's just shameful. It's the same with Northern Cyprus. They say the same things about the south, that there's some kind of tension, that Northern Cyprus is building up its military forces. Here, one of our viewers on YouTube asked me a question. The problem isn't with Northern Cyprus itself, but rather that Turkey sees Cyprus as part of itself, while Greek Cypriots see Cyprus as part of Greece, and that's why there could potentially be some kind of conflict here. So I replied to him in the comments that I don't believe any statements made by politicians, not just in Cyprus, but anywhere in the world. I look at their actions. What actions did Turkey take in 2004? There was a referendum in Cyprus where Turkish Cypriots voted in favor of unification with Greek Cypriots, while Greek Cypriots categorically voted against the unification of the island. If Turkey hadn't wanted this, it would have prevented the referendum by any means necessary. Not only did Turkey allow it, it actually supported it. And the people, the Turkish Cypriots, voted the way they wanted. They voted not to be with Turkey, but to unite with Southern Cyprus. And the Greek Cypriots refused this unification. We cannot say that Turkey wants to seize Cyprus. By the way, according to the plan of the United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, who was Secretary General at that time in 2004, and who wanted to complete the process of reunifying Cyprus, Turkish troops were supposed to leave. Turkey was ready to withdraw its troops and leave only a small contingent of 5,000 here. So, to say that Turkey considers Cyprus as its own territory and wants to conquer it, show me in which actions of Turkey or even in which statements by politicians is this evident? Or, for example, our subscriber writes to us that Turkey is constantly increasing its contingent on the island. There are frightening statements coming from officials claiming that supposedly Southern Cyprus will not see the next Easter and that it is dangerous to remain in such a frozen conflict. Well, first of all, there are frozen conflicts in the United Kingdom and in the United States. I'm talking about separatist movements, as well as in the European Union, and even more so in the Middle East. Neighboring countries do not consider the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, or Qatar as separate states. They view them as artificially created states. Some territories were artificially cut off by the British from Iran by military means, and some were cut off from Saudi Arabia. So, issues of separatism and changing borders exist everywhere. Northern Cyprus is not the only place where certain issues might arise. But, with all that said, what military buildup are we talking about? The fact that the Greek Cypriots, Greece sent 4 F-16 aircraft here, and Turkey sent 6 F-16 aircraft as additional air defense while the war in the Persian Gulf is ongoing, this is not considered a buildup. The flight time for an F-16 fighter jet with a full load of ammunition from Turkey to Northern Cyprus is 7 minutes. What are we even talking about? For the Turks to fight the Greek Cypriots, they don't need to reinforce anything here. They already have an official military contingent of 40,000 stationed here. Here they have special forces, air defense, helicopter regiments, and armored troops. And the Greek Cypriots only have 12,000 personnel in the National Guard. In any case, Turkey doesn't need to, but even if it wanted to capture the island, they already have enough armed forces here. And the Greeks have always officially believed, and still believe, that for some reason Turkey maintains a 100,000 strong military contingent here. These figures didn't just appear yesterday or 2 weeks ago, since the end of February when the war in the Persian Gulf began. This is how it has always been here for decades. This is not news, but the mass media in the European Union present it as if it were news, as if all these troops suddenly appeared over the past couple of weeks. But that's not true. And there are no conflicts in Northern Cyprus, nor can there be any. Once, we were also shown a conflict in the village of Pila on German television. Supposedly, the Turkish army moved tank columns somewhere towards southern Cyprus. When we saw this news in the morning, we thought it was just madness, that probably some crazy person wrote it for this German media outlet, this online media, because there wasn't a single photo or video. I told you about the situation when a fisherman somewhere out at sea many kilometers from the shore saw one missile launch, took out his phone and recorded the second one taking off. But in a populated area where hundreds of people live and thousands live nearby, there isn't a single photo of this so-called conflict, not a single video of this conflict, no consequences at all. So these Turkish armored columns supposedly moved somewhere, but in the end, they didn't get anywhere. Nothing has changed in the world. In other words, European media come up with these strange ideas to show that Cyprus is a potentially dangerous place. Why is this being done? Well, here I really don't know. But the fact that this is a lie from the first word to the last is absolutely true. Because if anything were actually happening, if, say, an armored personnel carrier moved somewhere, it would arrive, someone would photograph it, and they would say, that's it, there it is, standing 200 meters farther than it should be at the border, at the line of contact. All in all, it's a rather strange story. And I believe that this whole story is meant to raise the stakes in the battle for gas on the Cypriot shelf. I've talked about this in many videos. There are huge gas reserves here. Israel has them, Lebanon has them, Egypt and Cyprus have them too. Cyprus is divided. Greek Cypriots believe that the reserves belong to them. But since, even according to the constitution of the Republic of Cyprus, both Greeks and Turkish Cypriots live here, they are therefore obliged to share the gas and any profits from it with the Turkish Cypriots. Turkey, in turn, wants to participate in the extraction, transit and transportation of gas and to profit from it. Turkey is currently going through very difficult economic times, and the current government is unlikely to survive the next elections unless they come up with something that will improve the country's economy. And in the European Union, starting officially from 2027, it will no longer be possible to use their main source of natural gas, which is needed both for heating the country and for the economy, for keeping enterprises running, that is Russian gas. From 2027, it will no longer be possible to purchase it in any form. And here, there are reserves of this gas on the shelf, and each side is now raising the stakes. Thank God, not in reality, but just on the pages of online news media, apparently to show that the truth will be on our side and the gas will go to us, even though according to the constitution, it belongs to both sides. What did Turkey do? First of all, it started gas production. They have already sent specific ships, they sent naval fleet ships to cover them, and they have started extraction. Secondly, Turkey recently announced that they are laying a gas pipeline to Northern Cyprus. There is probably nothing in this news that bothers you. But there is one thing that bothers me. There is no gas transportation system in Northern Cyprus. And laying a pipeline is, of course, a very expensive and serious project from Turkey to Cyprus along the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, but it is possible. But here in Cyprus, there is no gas transportation system, and there are no buyers willing to pay to have the pipeline brought to their homes so they could have gas. I can't even come to an agreement with my neighbor. They installed a central sewage system on our street. I said, let's connect to it as well. He said, I don't need it. The local one is enough for me. And do you think someone is going to pay 10 or 15,000 euros to have a pipeline brought to their house just so his wife can cook with mains gas instead of bottled gas like she has done her whole life? Well, that's not going to happen. We don't need mains gas in our homes. The local residents won't pay for it. That's absolutely certain. I guarantee you that. But what could this pipeline actually be needed for? I have my own theory. When this gas is extracted by the Turkish company that's now engaged in exploration and drilling, it will somehow need to be delivered to Europe. In Turkey, the gas transportation system is ready, and delivering it through Turkey to the European Union poses no difficulties. Further from Turkey to Europe, there is also a gas transportation system. But how to deliver it from Cyprus to Turkey is a big question. And apparently, in order not to raise the stakes, not to cause a scandal, not to scare off all the interested parties in this matter, they said that this pipeline would go from Turkey to Cyprus, although in reality, it will be used the other way around. I think this is the only reasonable explanation for why they are doing this. Please write in the comments what you think about this. How correct and reasonable do you think this theory is? What I just told you. My friends, what is happening in the real estate market of Northern Cyprus in the first half of 2026? I have good news for you and I have bad news for you, but let's face the truth. What is the real estate market anyway? Let's take a look from the outside at what's happening here in Northern Cyprus by using Dubai as an example. A 60% increase in real estate prices. Everyone thinks this is very good. We're going to invest there now and make 60% profit. No bank will give you that kind of return. But people forget that if we want to resell this to someone, we need to have buyers in such huge numbers, like tens of thousands of new buyers for super expensive real estate properties. There simply aren't that many in the world. Well, you can rent out real estate and make money from that, but we forget that more than 90% of Dubai's residents earn about $1,000 a month, and no matter how much they want to, they simply can't afford to pay more than $300 for rent. Just Google who the population of Dubai is, what they're made up of, what people do, and how much they earn. For the most part, they're not sheikhs or multimillionaires. Accordingly, expensive properties will never be able to be rented out. As a result, both their liquidity and profitability drop significantly. The same situation exists in Northern Cyprus. Here, real estate prices have gone up. I told you that prices increased by 100 to 300% during 2022 to 2023. The good news is that there aren't a large number of construction projects in Northern Cyprus. In previous years, yes, there has been construction, everything is being built, but not in such huge quantities as, for example, in Dubai. That's good news. The good news is that the payback period from renting a property here is still about 10 to 12 years. Whereas in the USA, it's 20 years, and in Dubai, it's usually 20 years as well. In European countries, it's usually 40 years. That's the payback period for real estate, residential real estate from rental income. Yes, you see, how can they put it? They might say, you know what, I recently had an investor visit me, and he said, those are serious guys. They've now invited Ukrainians. They have the best air defense systems in the world. And he made some kind of joke saying that now every 5-star hotel has its own air defense system, and every 7-star hotel might even have, how should I put this? How should I put this without quoting his swear word? Basically, to strike back in response. That's it. So what does that mean? So that won't affect them. But here's the real story. Who are you going to rent it to? Your profitability percentage will drop so much that there will be no point in Dubai for you anymore. The year 2026 shows that we can no longer see Northern Cyprus as some kind of lost paradise. Here's a secret, inexpensive place in the Mediterranean, a real paradise. The region is becoming more expensive, more international, more regulated, and more serious. Nevertheless, it is still at least 100% undervalued in terms of real estate prices compared to neighboring southern European countries. And there are also opportunities here that you won't find in the European Union, in southern Cyprus or in Dubai. And as of today, I wouldn't say this is a real estate boom, even though people say the boom has started. And indeed, I am working so much now. Our company is working at full capacity. There are just so many buyers. But I don't think this is a boom. I think it's just an explosive growth. And in my opinion, this is connected to the fact that there is currently a crisis in Dubai. This crisis is not so much because of the war, because, well, the war will end and the market could recover. Dubai has been heading toward this crisis for a year and a half already. They had a very large increase, 60% in real estate prices. And there just aren't that many buyers in the world willing to pay such high prices. That's why it's already difficult to resell these properties and make any kind of profit. And making a profit from renting is simply impossible. Simply because if you Google who the population of Dubai is, who mostly lives there, and how much they earn, you'll see that on average they make about $1,000 a month. Accordingly, we can understand that just as they are now paying $300 a month to rent an apartment, they simply won't be able to pay any more than that. Accordingly, if property prices are rising but rental income stays the same, the percentage of profit from renting drops significantly. Investors see this without any need for explanation. They just notice it with their trained eye and start looking for new regions. And what is the current trend on the global market? The trend is that we are moving away from this artificial luxury, when, for example, in the desert, where people basically can't live in that climate, artificial luxury was created. We are entering an era of authenticity. This is what Dubai's neighbors took advantage of, taking part of the market from them. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, I'm talking about Oman. Northern Cyprus has also taken advantage of this, because no matter what happens, even if there is no oil, no gas, no electricity, nothing at all, we will still be able to live quite comfortably in Northern Cyprus. But, well, on the Arabian Peninsula, we wouldn't be able to live there. No matter how much we might want to, there won't be air, the right temperature, water, or the kinds of food that grow here in Northern Cyprus. They simply don't grow there. So, investors looked at all this with their expert eyes, and some of them shifted their focus to Northern Cyprus. That's good news. We really do have a lot of investors, a lot of buyers, precisely because the Dubai market is currently at rock bottom and it's unlikely that it will ever grow again. There's simply nowhere left for it to grow there. Northern Cyprus has its own issues. For example, we are also experiencing rising housing prices. And if an apartment ends up costing around 150,000 euros, but buyers only have 100,000 in their pocket, they simply won't be able to purchase it and will leave for a cheaper location somewhere in Southeast Asia. Yes, it's not as safe there. Yes, the cultural level is different there. Yes, it takes about 20 hours to get there from Europe. It's inconvenient, but it's cheaper there, so they'll go there. That's it. The good news is that there are many new projects in Northern Cyprus. In other words, demand still exceeds supply. The good news is that there are a large number of listings on the secondary market. At one time, someone bought an apartment for 20,000 and now they're selling it for 40 or 50, making a good profit. But 50 is still much cheaper than exactly the same apartment for 100,000 or 150,000 from the developer company in the same complex, maybe even in the same building. So the presence of a secondary housing market in Northern Cyprus really smooths out the situation, giving you the opportunity to buy inexpensively and allowing us to keep working and earning from it. Plus, since the season has started now and there really is a boom in rentals, we offer our buyers 1,900 euros of guaranteed monthly income from our real estate properties. You come, choose, buy, and from the very first month you start receiving 1,900 euros of guaranteed net income. Moreover, all taxes, all expenses, payments for electricity, water supply, internet, anything at all, repairs, these are covered from our budget and are not related to this money. You receive 1,900 euros net to your bank account. At the same time, we signed the contract for 30 months. In my opinion, that's wonderful. This is the kind of opportunity we are offering now, and it also helps us to sell more and more, to satisfy more and more of our customers. But even when, at some point, this affordable secondary real estate runs out, we will still be 100% cheaper than neighboring Southern European countries. The only thing in which we are behind them today is the lack of equally excellent infrastructure for leisure and living. But as far as I can see with my own eyes, when I travel around the regions of our beautiful country, infrastructure is being built, and within the next year, 2 or 3, it will be completed. Once it is built with this new excellent infrastructure that will be better, higher quality, and more modern than the infrastructure of Southern European countries, I hope that we will also see an increase in prices for new housing because we are still competitive. We are still 100% cheaper than real estate in neighboring countries. And if the infrastructure reaches the same level as theirs, then accordingly property values will also rise and our investors will be able to make good profits from this. And the only question we should be asking ourselves now is no longer whether we should consider Northern Cyprus or not. The only real question is whether it will be too late if I start considering it in 6 months or a year. Will prices have already gone up? Will today's excellent opportunities have disappeared?